Well, what an eventful few days that was. So look, I wanted to talk about Trump's third term thing, right? But we also had a lot of news that broke yesterday after the special elections that should tell you a lot about where everything is. So we're going to talk a lot about that too, but let's start very quickly with Trump's third term, which shouldn't be a thing, right? Shouldn't be a thing. But look, Donald Trump has floated the idea of an extended stay a few times since returning to the White House, as well as on the campaign trail when he was doing all that shit, right? And on Sunday, he made his most extensive comments on the subject, with him saying on a phone interview with NBC that he was not joking about running for a third term, saying that there are many ways you could do it. Sure, bruh. Now, predictably, this is freaking people the fuck out. Obviously, Donald Trump is the last person you would want to say this with his particular history. Sup, bruh? And of course, the 22nd Amendment of the United States prohibits a president for serving more than 2 terms. Now, you have some people pointing to Andy Ogle's third term resolution thing in the House, and then other people pointing to the Third Term Project with this very professional looking website that looks like it was made in fucking GeoCities. But on that website, specifically, it lists ways it could happen. So fuck it. Why not? Let's go through them, right? And see how valid they are. First is the Article 5 Convention. It reads here, the Article 5 Convention can be called by the states to amend the U.S. Constitution and change the unfair 22nd Amendment. All Republicans at the state level must publicly get behind the Third Term Project. Yeah, fucking no. First off, there are not enough red states or Republican-controlled legislatures to have an Article 5 convention on this. Secondly, this would just assume that all elected Republican officials in the United States would want Donald Trump to run for a third term. And no government officials would want to run for president instead. By the way, have you seen these fucking people? You're telling me mascara couch fucker over here doesn't want a shot at the Oval? What do you think he's puffing his chest out so much for every time he's on camera? These motherfuckers want that job. Secondly, constitutional amendment. Well, I'm just going to stop you right there. First off, Andy Ogle's resolution here is performative as fuck, right? We've talked before about performative House bills that always come up. Andy Ogle's is so that. And like I said, Republicans do not control these state legislatures they would need to ratify an amendment. And also, they don't have the fucking seats, like at all, to pass a fucking amendment to the Constitution, not in the Senate and especially not the House. And the people who will argue against that very clear fact just say, well, they'll just do whatever they want. They'll just do whatever they want. They'll just make an edict or some shit and it'll just stay forever. And honestly, I mean, no disrespect by this, but I really question people's clairvoyance when they consider things like this. Multiple different bodies and institutions are responsible in some way for running elections. It touches a lot of hands. The executive branch cannot just unilaterally take over elections. That's not how it fucking works. If Donald Trump tomorrow was like, well, all elections have to be run like this, the people who run them would just be like, no, what the fuck are you going to do? If the president could unilaterally just make himself a forever president, Donald Trump would not be the first person attempting this in history. Do you understand? Like, so many presidents are not like super like, you think Andrew Jackson is an honorable motherfucker? Like, yes, I'll sir, you know. But even discounting that he's not in charge of running elections, or even if you want to say that he's just going to decide to run for a third term, again, these motherfuckers in Congress are power hungry. I want you to think about this sincerely. If you told Ted Cruz that tomorrow he would get to be president, and then tomorrow Donald Trump says, actually, I'm not leaving, I'm going to serve a third term, Ted Cruz would walk over broken fucking glass with the other like 50 senators who want power over that same broken fucking glass to say, oh, we need to impeach him and hold him accountable, send the military to get him out of there, right? And if you don't believe me, ask his daughters where his loyalty lies. That is the ultimate check of power in the United States. Other people's greed. But let's skip about to the Supreme Court. Surely they're super into Trump, right? They're all just mad friends right now, right? Look, there are not enough justices on the court who want to destroy institutionalism. Maybe 2 of them, but the others, not so much. Especially John Roberts, who has ran his court for fucking ever, honestly, with the specific goal of maintaining trust in the institution. I didn't say he was good at it, right? He's not doing a great job of maintaining that trust, but that is such a reach that they would rule against. It's such a fucking reach that they would actually push back on it. Again, that would diminish the Supreme Court's power too. And that brings us to the most batshit theory of all of this. JD Vance could run and then willingly give up his seat and let Trump go for a 3rd term. Fucking really? Like, we're real? This is really? Really? You think JD Vance is going to get elected president with all the powers and attention and privileges of the presidency of the United States, and he's just gonna go, you know, actually, you take that, bro. It's all good. It's great. You know, there's a lazy boy right there. I'm just gonna go check that out. Oh, then the other version of this is if Donald Trump Jr. listen, okay, listen to me. Listen, Donald Trump is a lot of things, right? He's a fucking asshole. He's authoritarian coded. He's a liar, fraudster, all of those things, right? He's also a very good marketer, and he's really good at hijacking headlines. He has strengths to be able to make all of this shit the way it is right now. That being said, Donald Trump Jr. is a fucking coke addict, okay? No, really? Really? I think some people truly believe that all of the people who were around Donald Trump just like worship the ground he walks on, because they say that shit in interviews all of the time, but they're thinking about Trump fans, not his coworkers, right? And there's also a difference between public and private. Everybody in Biden's inner circle during when he was initially running would always tell you, listen, he's sharp, he's smart, he's ready to do the job, he can do backflips, he's working out every day, he fucks, until one catastrophically bad debate, and then...
Don't you think she looks tired?
And sincerely, I'm not telling you to ignore Trump's perchance for wanting to have a 3rd term and his need to fuck with American democracy. Absolutely don't ignore that. I've said it before, just because the US is not literally Nazi Germany doesn't mean Trump is not a wannabe authoritarian. Somebody asked me this week to stop comparing Trump to George W. Bush, as if we've passed a different Rubicon. And I understand the fear of wanting to take this seriously and not diminish Trump's actions and treat them as playful so that he can just continue to backslide democracy and make abnormal things normal. But I would probably argue that some of the things George W. Bush did were also quasi-authoritarian as well. The fucking Patriot Act, not great for personal freedoms, right? What about him just ignoring Congress and writing himself a note, I could do whatever the fuck I want, in a signing statement? You have to understand, people like Donald Trump who want whatever the fuck they want, abuse the power they have, and then bluff at the power they don't. There is real harm that Trump is currently doing with the power he has, like deporting the wrong person to an El Salvadorian maximum prison, and then claiming Trump can't really do anything about it, it's already done, or the courts have no jurisdiction or anything. That's fucking horrific. Or the students that he's detained just because they dissented against him, right, with their green cards, and then going like, oh, no, actually, you're a terrorist sympathizer now. Now, obviously, in those instances, there's going to be pushback, right? And Trump will lose some of those battles. But that doesn't mean that man or those students are immediately safe. That doesn't mean that trans people or immigrants aren't in danger. That doesn't mean everything is totally okay. You are allowed to say things are really bad. Trump is not Hitler. He wants the same power, though, and we can deny him that, all in the same frame. Do you understand? All of those things can be true. I get trying to oversimplify or overcomplicate things so you're prepared for the worst. Again, I get it, but that is not an effective strategy against propaganda machines, right? You have to understand where the bluster ends in order to be effective and combat it. And that's where we get to Tuesday's elections. Tuesday was the host to 3 special elections that are incredibly important, because if you don't know, special elections are the canary in the coal mine of how the political environment is trending after a major electoral shift. And I'll let you take a wild fucking guess at where it's going. You had 2 deep red seats vacated by both Matt Gaetz and Mike Waltz, you know, Mr. Signal Chat, that had major Democratic vote surges that halved their margins significantly. For example, the seat that's open that Mike Waltz used to have was won by 33 points in the last election. Randy Fine, who won it on Tuesday, won it by 14 points. That's fucking crazy. That's a plus 14 Democratic shift, plus or minus a few points. But that's not all. The Wisconsin Supreme Court case, probably the biggest race to watch in the country on Tuesday, swung towards the liberal candidate Susan Crawford, keeping the liberal 4-3 advantage on the Wisconsin Supreme Court with a 10-point plus margin of victory, and they're still counting. And overall, it was a very, very, very good night for Democratic-backed candidates, and a very bad night if you wanted to try to buy an election with fucking $1 million checks, you goof. Because if you hadn't heard, Elon Musk had been going across Wisconsin like fucking Mr. Beast or some shit, handing out $1 million checks to voters to try to buy the election. Hey, bitch, didn't work. And that's doubly bad for Elon because A, this election was framed as a referendum on Musk, and B, on top of that, Trump hinted that Elon and Doge would probably not be sticking around for super long, framing it as at some point Elon has to go back to his company. Yeah, sure, buddy. Like Steve Bannon was super jazzed to just go back to his thing. He was so happy to be out of the White House, I'm sure. And there it is. I have to stress this about this Wisconsin election. Keep in mind, there was voter intimidation. There were new laws that hurt people who wanted to vote passed in the books. There were a lot of things working against the people in Wisconsin, and they out-organized and won. Because again, Donald Trump wants to be king, but he is not a fucking king, all right? He cannot run for a 3rd term because his allies are power-hungry assholes. He can't buy elections because the people he sends to buy the fucking election look more clownish than the platforms that they fucked up. And he can't expunge dissent or the wave that's coming because the more he throws at people, the angrier and more dissenting and more engaged they get. And this is a process, all right? This isn't the last special election that's ever going to happen. And in 2028, if Donald Trump and the Republicans lose their grip on everything, that's not the last election ever. Democracy and living here and fixing all the shit that you want and building the world that you want is a fucking garden that you have to constantly tend to and water and then look up shit about photosynthesis and be like, why the fuck did I get into taking care of plants? If you want it to be less teetering on the edge of the apocalypse, all right, you have to work with that. You have to mold it into that. So engage with the process, mitigate the damage, take care of one another, stop reading fucking conspiracy theories, okay? And don't believe the emperor with no clothes when he's like, do you see the fucking Jordans I got on? Let me know what you think in the comments. Hi, it's me again in the angel shirt version of myself from the future, I guess. I don't know. All right, let's talk about Trump's reciprocal tariffs. So Donald Trump has been teasing reciprocal tariffs on this big Liberation Day thing for a little while right now. If you couldn't tell by his multiple other times where he's tried to implement tariffs and then pulled them back. And after an election where his butt boy got his ass kicked or his party's margin was halved in some key states like Florida, Trump introduced some of the most egregious tariffs thus far in his presidency. Pretty much a 10% baseline tariff on all imports into the United States, with larger tariffs levied against certain other entities like China at 34% or the European Union at 20%. In fact, if you want to take a look at this handy dandy chart of who we're starting shit with for absolutely no reason, it's pretty much everybody. Now, shortly after these tariffs and almost predictably, stock futures plunged, and I cannot stress this enough. This is the most selfish and deeply unpopular move this motherfucker could have done. And you have a bunch of people trending Great Depression on Twitter. I should also say, all right, a lot of people blaming tariffs for the Great Depression. That's not necessarily true. Tariffs contributed to the Great Depression, but there were several other economic factors specifically that made that happen, all right? There's no one-to-one specifically in this situation. But look, that doesn't mean that the tariffs are this chill thing we just get to experience every 3 to 4 weeks when Donald Trump has a fit, all right? I'll be honest, I don't know how permanent these ones are going to be, right? Because the Senate is now signaling that they are not happy, passing a bipartisan resolution with multiple Republican senators crossing the aisle to try to revoke Trump's tariffs on Canada. Now, as of now, unfortunately, it's been stopped in the House, but that hasn't stopped Republicans or even business leaders from warning everybody throughout Tuesday, saying that they thought this was bad. Warning in no uncertain terms that the blue wave they may have seen ripples of on Tuesday could turn into a tsunami if they don't get this under control. And look, obviously there are bogus reasons that are purported for why these tariffs are going through, but part of me can't help but feel this is just kind of Trump starting shit because he didn't want the entirety of Wednesday to be about how Republicans got their ass kicked in those special elections. And I don't know where things are going to be currently at when you see this, right? Maybe the market corrected. Maybe he rescinded the tariffs. Can you tell the uncertainty isn't a great thing to have right now? The economy is already a frustrating subject for a lot of Americans. And this is the dumbest fucking political strategy you could ever implement from this guy. What's even worse is it could be argued that the Senate vote was a pretty emphatic dissent to signal to our partners that this is Trump's decision and not theirs. But obviously, no matter whose decision it is, consumers and everyday people are going to have to pay for this shit. So look, while Trump's trade war may be temporary, and while saying we're going to just reach a Great Depression is a little bit of doomerism, I do think it's worth noting how bad this stuff could get and what the ramifications of him fucking around for his own selfish bullshit could be. So we'll have to wait and see where these tariffs go, but we can only hope that whenever Donald Trump wants to throw a fucking tantrum like today on Liberation Day, where he just randomly announces tariffs again for the umpteenth time, it's clear who's the problem here, all right? It's not America as a whole, because America as a whole fucking hates this shit. Businesses, people, fucking Republican senators hate this shit, right? Only this fat piece of shit likes it. And hopefully when this baby backs down again, we can make sure it crystallizes how bad this little political stunt has been. Okay, I wanted to add one more story actually about the Nintendo Switch 2. On the same day Donald Trump announced his really super cool tariffs, Nintendo had a pretty big presentation for their new console, the Nintendo Switch 2. And it seems like it really delivered. Some really cool new features like the Joy-Cons being able to be used as mice, and also like Mario Kart World, which looks amazing, like a persistent world Mario Kart like Forza. And then you have things like Donkey Kong Bonanza, which looks like it was a Donkey Kong game made by the Super Mario Odyssey team. Not the same like country stuff. I love Donkey Kong Country, but this seems like its own thing, and the destructible environments seem really cool. The game sharing multiplayer from the DS being back, Soul Calibur 2 and GameCube games being available on the Nintendo Switch Online platform. Fucking the spiritual successor to Bloodborne randomly just being a Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive. The console looks great, and after the presentation ended, people were wondering, okay, well, there wasn't really a price on screen. How much is this? Well, soon after, listings popped up, and it turns out the Nintendo Switch is going to retail at around $450 for the console alone, and around $500 for the bundle with Mario Kart World in it. And look, that is technically more expensive than the Switch, but it is reasonable around it's not as bad as we thought it could be. What is bad, though, is when you look at what the game prices are. Because right now, the games for Nintendo Switch are retailing at about $80 to $90 a game, with physical costing even more. But even still, $80 for a digital game is fucking crazy. Especially for a system that isn't necessarily as powerful as some of the other behemoths that we have. This sent the internet into a tailspin. A lot of the hype drowning out, being like, what the fuck is with this price? And at a time with the inflation and all the other stuff we were just talking about. And look, Nintendo has said that they were going to charge up to $80 to $90 for these games, but that still instills a lot of fear in people, worrying that competitors are going to see that and then raise their prices. And overall, the entire gaming industry across the board is going to start charging $80 to $90 a game, which is so fucking unsustainable for how many games come out, how much you can play. Listen, I think there are a couple things to look at here, but the main thing I want to kind of focus on is we're going to charge up to this much for a game. Nintendo actually kind of tried this with Tears of the Kingdom, charging a $70 price tag versus the $60 price tag for other Switch games, saying, oh, it's just so chock full of content, it's worth it. But here's the thing, there is a price people are willing to pay for things like Mario Kart, right? Like, that's understandable. Unfortunately, even if it's overpriced, people are going to pay it. And that doesn't go the same for a lot of other games. And because of that insane price tag, the volume of games sold could go down. But even within Nintendo's language, it feels like they're trying to test this out to see if people are going to kind of take it and deal with it. The Switch 2 is a big launch for Nintendo. They want it to feel like this perfect premium product. They're making so many of these fucking things specifically to try to fight against scalpers. And with that, if this price tag becomes a hindrance, I'm not sure. This is actually 100% pure speculation. I think Nintendo would probably back off just because they want this whole thing to go smoothly and look great and just be nice little headlines for them. They've done little things like that in the past before, but honestly, a lot of times they've stuck to their guns and been uncompromising. But who knows? I think a lot of people are vocally very frustrated by this. I personally am, and I don't think I would want to buy $80 to $90 games. That's a Rubicon that's very hard for me to cross. And if I do get a Nintendo Switch 2, man, the volume of which I invest and engage into that system of games is going to be a lot less with that price tag. And with the amount console makers lose money in their first year of making consoles, I feel like Nintendo probably needs to figure this shit out. But anyway, that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. We released Freestyle of the News on Monday last week. You can go check that out. It's one of my favorite FSTN episodes we've done. We got a brand new one this week. And again, my name is Tabani. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all soon. Let's go.